Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to...
This is why bread is so much healthier in Europe, even though it has gluten. Since when is gluten unhealthy to you? Well,
I don't really eat bread. People know that about me.
Oh, I
But if
love
I go to Europe,
bread.
I will probably eat some bread. Now, I also have issues with gluten. I don't really digest it well. I'm not celiac, but when I eat gluten, I don't feel right. But I don't shout it from the
What does that
rooftops
mean,
because I
feeling
just
right?
don't
You get his tummy, you get upset.
have a whole lot of scientific evidence to say this is why I feel this way. But I talk to thousands of people that feel the same way. But why is it that we can travel to Europe and actually eat a baguette and eat some good bread and not have issues? As a matter of fact, so many people will travel to Europe. They'll say, I'm just going to let my guard down. I'm going to have this bread. I'm going to have this good food. And then they end up losing weight. And they end up feeling better. There's a huge...
I will say though, all these like gluten problems, like lactose problems. Yeah, I feel like I wasn't really hearing about it when I was in Lithuania. Only when I came here, it's like, oh, lactose intolerant, gluten intolerant. It was never really a thing in Lithuania. I don't know, maybe it wasn't talked about, maybe nobody cared, or maybe something is different, I don't know.
Huge difference, right? These are a few reasons as to why bread is so different
Because
in
I only
Europe.
hear like
First off,
people doing specific diets because of religious purposes. Aside from that,
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up eating everything. Everybody I know growing up ate everything. Nobody had any issues. So, I think, I don't know.
a lot of it has to do with the harvesting in the first place. Okay, there are different practices, but first and foremost, the soil is different.
is he a
There are higher levels
nutritionist
of
or what is he?
Looks like a fitness influencer.
Oh,
sulfur in the soil in Europe than there are in the United States. Now, what happens here? Well, sulfur levels are directly correlated with gliadin levels. Gliadin is the protein that is in gluten that is the actual culprit. So gliadin can trigger the increase of what is called zonulin, and zonulin is a protein which can trigger in high levels when it's activated to make the gut permeable. When the gut becomes permeable, what happens is you have an increase in lipopolysaccharides, LPS, also just a form of gram-negative bacteria. When these cross through a highly permeable gut, it initiates an immune response, which is directly correlated with higher levels of inflammation and whatnot. In fact, in the research setting, when they're trying to trigger inflammation in a body, a rodent, they will inject lipopolysaccharides because they know that it triggers an inflammatory response. So if we have lipopolysaccharides that leak through a permeable...
No, what's interesting? He's wearing rings on both of the ring fingers. So
He
he's married
is?
in the States and in Europe.
oh.
So
I don't know. I just noticed it because it looks on both of the fingers. He has the rings on both.
He
It
does.
just
Let me
looks,
see,
it
let me
looks
see,
weird.
let me see,
I don't know,
let
it
me
looks
see.
weird.
result of high levels of zonulin, you can do the math, there's going to be a problem. So by connecting dots here, although we can't say with randomized controlled
He has
trials,
two
we can at least
watches?
say strongly mechanistically.
He has two watches too. What? Oh, okay.
Different times though.
Just to make sure the time is correct. Okay.
Okay, more permeable gut, more lipopolysaccharides, more problems, right? And if gliadin is associated with that, then a bread that's going to have less gliadin, a bread pasta that's going to have less gliadin is going to be less problematic.
Yeah.
Now,
Two
we also
watches,
have
two
other
rings.
things like glyphosate and whatnot, but I'm not going to go...
The thing with rings, what looks weird is that they're on the same finger.
If
you put on different, whatever, but on the same finger, it just looks interesting.
Maybe for every angle, he's always ready.
How do you explain the watches? Two different times of that.
today because it's just too hard to have that discussion with full transparency and scientific rigor. Now, the other thing we have to recognize is that the bread-making culture in Europe is very, very different. What does bread look like in the United States? Bread in the United States, much like a lot of starchy
What would
things...
you say? Bread in the States and bread in Europe? Because you can talk about bread in Europe. I don't think I have European bread.
Well, the packaged bread here, they put sugar, but that's
like the smells.
I mean, the packaged bread there in Europe, I'm based on the videos, it doesn't have sugar, so that's the difference. Now the fresh bread, I feel it's the same bread. I don't know.
You think the fresh bread that they make here is the same bread as European bread?
I mean, how different can it be? I don't know.
Ingredients.
Yeah, but...
so you could be fooled, like if they put two breads on the table, You'd be able
to be fair, to make an experiment like that, you have to have them side by side.
Yeah.
I've never tried that, so I can't say like with any certainty. But as far as like the fresh bread, I don't really see why it would be different if they use the same recipes. I would say there is way more variety of breads here than I have like in Lithuania. You know, I'm sure like in other countries it's different, but like in Germany we've seen a lot of breads. Yeah, in Germany we see, so I can't compare to Germany. I've never been.
Because different breads have different tastes.
Yeah, so I don't. But as far as the packaged bread,
yeah,
it has more sugar here. Yeah,
Mm.
but what's like, I guess, bread culture, we do have a lot of like the dark breads.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Those like yeah, we have a lot of like, it's
rye.
You can find them there, but you know, whenever we want to make fried bread, we're like having to look for it. Like, it's not as common. So I would say like that bread is not as popular here. Like, but
that earthy bread.
Yeah, that. But in terms of like the white bread that you know that we're thinking of, the
Wonder bread,
the baguette, no, not that, but the baguettes, you know, they taste good here. They taste good in Europe. You know, it's just a lot of YouTube videos make it sound like, oh, they don't have fresh breads here, as if all we buy like the prepackaged breads. I've never bought a prepackaged bread here.
To me, it was always weird to get bread that's not sliced, because I was always used to bread already sliced.
That you honestly in Lithuania, that wasn't a thing until like 2000 something. We used to buy just a loaf, and then at some point the stores introduced sliced. That was like a big deal.
Oh yeah.
It's all about preservatives. It's all about how do we get something to stay on the shelf and act as filler that is relatively cheap. So bread in the United States, it is different. It's high in sugar, it's high in preservatives. Like, why do you need to have 27 ingredients in your bread? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? But in Europe, there is a demand for fresh same-day bread. I'm sure in the US, if we had the opportunity, we would want that. So we want fresh baked bread. But in Europe, there is a high demand for it, for legitimate fresh.
But we have that though. That's the thing.
But for us, that would be like, that's not an everyday thing. The fresh bread you get like on a Saturday or a Sunday.
But you can get it every day if you want.
No.
Yes.
No.
You just don't go to the store.
No, because Americans, we don't shop every day for groceries.
Okay, but that doesn't affect the availability. I'm saying it's available.
Yeah,
just because you don't go to get it doesn't mean it's not there.
But common practice is to get bread for the week. You get the ones that's packaged
already. I get it. You know, you shop for the week or like twice a week. I get that.
But Europeans will literally shop like that day for that apple that will be eaten today.
Okay, but doesn't mean my point is not how often you shop. My point is, if I want a fresh bread, I have the ability to go get it right now. So that's what I'm saying. It's available. It's just, you know, now the habits of different people. You know, we don't eat bread at all, so you know, it doesn't affect us. If whenever I make, you know, we want bread, I make it. We don't buy it, so it doesn't matter. But I'm saying availability is there.
Baked same-day bread. Because of that, the amount of bread that has a lot of preservatives and stuff like that is much less than in the United States. So because of that, you're getting, well, already a simpler bread with less preservatives, less sugar, that, by the way, also has less gliadin in it. You can kind of get where I'm going with this. Not to mention, Europe is all about locally raised stuff or locally grown things. Simply geographically, because of the way the supply chain is, it's shorter distances, so it's easier to get fresher ingredients that are not potentially grown through mono-agriculture, which we'll talk about in a second. You're getting things that are local and things that all make sense together that haven't been sitting on a truck with a bunch of preservatives because they're having to go all the way across the country or shipped overseas. It's all contained.
I feel like even if you make your bread at home, it's still gonna have like those preservatives in them.
Well, the only thing, what he's talking about is the wheat, how it's grown. So, based on, you know, the soil. So yes, our flour would be this type of different flour than in Europe, according to him. So that is true. Unless you want to ship European flour, that's gonna get expensive. You start importing flour, but it starts with the flour.
Grain harvesting in the first place is very, very, very different.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this card. Okay, you ready? All right.
Okay, there are tight regulations on pesticides.
It would be interesting, you know, we can compare the ingredients like at the Publix fresh bread, for example. Just see what's the ingredient list to see how is it simple, or do they also put some random shit in there? That would be interesting to see, actually.
And herbicides in Europe. Okay, there are some regulations in the US, but nothing like what it is in Europe. So what they can just spray on a crop is seemingly very, very different. Does this affect the genetic culture of the actual plant? Oh, I'm sure it does. But it also comes down to what are you literally ingesting? There's also something called the Common Agricultural Policy. There's good field management. Okay, so that is focused on true sustainability. It's focused on the biodiversity. It's focused on the crop rotation, which is required to not deplete the soil. They also have a big focus on preventing overcropping. What does overcropping really do? Well, eventually, what you're going to do is you're going to deplete the soil. Okay, and when it comes down to why some grains could be good, why vegetables have benefits. A lot of it comes down to the minerals and the nutrients that are in it, but if you have a depleted soil, do the math, right? So in the United States, it is just different. And I'm not trying to even throw shade. I'm being real here because when I go to Europe, I want to eat all the food that I possibly can without feeling like it's going to be problematic for me. And the good thing is it's probably not going to be. So in the United States, just given geography, I want you to think about something. The United States is relatively isolated, really. We are like a giant floating island, really. Like compared to Asia, compared to Europe, things are closer together there. We are far apart. We're forced to kind of do things ourselves, right? In a lot of ways. American grown and raised, right? It's like what we even look for as Americans. Okay, but with that, it's all about speed and volume. We're feeding a lot of people and we export. So we also need to have mono agriculture where we can consolidate and grow volume. And when we do that, it's hard to rotate crop. It's easy to overcrop. So what happens is you end up with a pretty nutrient devoid food. And you try to make a product that can be exported or can get across the country, so it's got preservatives in it. The food is flat out different. The bread is probably one of those monumentally different things. Now this will trickle down into...
But then, it's not just the bread. If it starts with the wheat, right? So anything made out of wheat, anything using flour, so breads, cakes, anything, any product will be different in that, if that's the case. That's interesting points he's making about, not rotating the soil, because you have to do all those things as agriculture. I don't know, they didn't rotate it, and that's interesting.
The other potentially preserved goods, the crackers, the snacks, things like that. Now, I did put a link down below for a brand that I recommend for a simple portion. If you want $8. The other thing that we do have to consider, and I've talked about this in another video, is that the actual portions of bread that they eat are generally smaller. Like they might have a baguette, they might have a roll with something. But one thing that is really, really, really interesting is going to be a little bit contrarian. Okay, with bread, for example. Bread is not insanely caloric. It is, compared to some things, but compared to junk food, it's not as calorically dense. And what happens here is if someone is eating wholesome bread, good quality bread, a lot of calorie displacement happens. Now, granted, they're going to put butter on it, stuff like that, but if the bread is so fresh and good in Europe, you don't even need the butter on it. And you can just fill up on a few hundred calories of bread versus something that's super calorically dense and covered in seed oils and saturated fat. So they're not making...
I'm gonna put the butter.
No, what he's saying is true, but nobody really eats the bread by itself, though. I guess for an American tasting fresh bread for the first time, oh my god, the bread is so good. Yeah, but if you live there, ain't nobody eating a croissant, okay, that's different. A croissant is a specific type of bread. I'm
gonna put chocolate on that.
But to a regular bread, like a baguette, I don't know. I'm not French, but
if it's hot, very fresh, I could eat it by itself like that. But
I love bread, so sometimes I might eat a baguette by itself. Okay, but regularly you eat bread for sandwiches. You don't eat sandwiches or as a side dish, for example, with the soup. My father likes to eat bread on the side, stuff like that. Bread by itself, just let me go eat some bread. I don't know how many people do that.
Yeah.
Bread with seed oils and things like that. They're making bread the old-fashioned way.
But of course, what he's saying is true. Eating bread, if you just eat plain bread versus junk food, it's no comparison.
So having a little bit of volume of this bread might displace some of the other stuff. Let's talk about the trickle-down effect. Okay, because food marketing is very different in Europe than it is in the United States. There's strict guidelines on how you can market food. And I talk about this because it goes down into the snacks too, right? Because if you're looking at even a preserved cracker or even cereals, and you are getting it from a grain that is grown in sulfur-rich, nutrient-rich soils, even if preservatives are added to it, remember that the preservative guidelines are significantly different. So it's going to be a better, arguably less dangerous preservative. You're going to have a higher quality grain. You're going to have something that is relatively locally sourced. So even the quote-unquote processed food is different. The ultra-processed foods, which of course are coming a lot of times from the United States, are designed for export over there. So having the occasional processed food is not going to be as problematic. If you sit down at a French restaurant and you have some crackers and brie, you'll notice that even the crackers feel different. Have you ever seen that? If you've been to Europe, like the crackers are different. If you go to anywhere where you're going to have anything that is like flour based, even
well, types of crackers popular there is different. We do have those crackers there, but they're not popular. People don't like them. People like the Ritz. But the European crackers, they do have them. Expensive
What would be
though.
an example of a European cracker?
They're thinner, and the ones like my mother brings.
Oh.
It's but we have them
It's
here.
really earthy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very earthy. Like it's a cracker.
It's like a Triscuit.
It's pretty healthy actually.
It's buckwheat.
Yeah, like it's pretty healthy. Here, the crackers, when you think of crackers, you think of Ritz, which is basically like a
Buttery, cheesy goodness.
yeah. It's a different thing than what crackers are in Europe.
the pasta is different, right? People all the time go to Italy and they eat pasta and they don't have as much of a problem with it. What about refined sugars and things like that? Refined sugar is still going to be refined sugar, but given the quality of some of the other ingredients, they probably get canceled out quite a bit better. So how do we adopt these principles the best that we can in the United States? If you can bake sourdough at home, because sourdough is fermented, some of that fermentation can break down some of the sugars and some of the proteins, and it becomes somewhat of a microbially active food. So if you had to choose a bread, choose a sourdough.
I don't like sourdough. That's a problem.
If you had to choose a bread,
I'm questioning. Maybe I haven't had good sourdough to dip it in.
I don't like sourdough.
that's even better. Make your own sourdough, but it's a monumental task and
It
something
looks
that a lot of
soft.
like homestead
That's
type.
why
No,
it
it's
looks to
soft.
me look good.
The consistency is good, but it's sour. I don't like it.
People are doing, and it's interesting, and I recommend it. The other things that you can do is you can look for foods that don't have the preservatives and don't have the additives. They do exist, okay? But you can also rely on higher quality bread from bakeries that are baking the same day, rather than just going for whatever is on the shelf. Such a stark difference between the bread that is on the shelf that has 27 ingredients and the bread that has 5.
What's interesting is here, the fresh bread and that other bread is in two different sections of the store. So it's kind of odd to go, okay, the packaged bread that's able to sit on the shelf for quite some time in one part of the store, and the fresh bread that can only last maybe a few days and it has to be thrown out in a different part of the store. Like the fresh bread is always by the fresh produce and everything that's natural and good, and the processed bread is with the sugary snacks.
I don't remember where the bread is at in Europe and Lithuania. I'm trying to think. I want to say like the bread, like a smaller breads, like buns type of stuff. It is separately though, because those they're freshly baked. You take it with the pliers, the tongs. Yeah, you take
Pliers,
whatever.
Whoa.
With the tongs, you take them. They're separately. The breads, I don't remember how, if they're together or not. I can't even say.
Like the bread that comes off the truck.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I don't remember. But video, interesting points. I think what, for the most part, what he said is true about the soil. That would make a lot of sense actually. Not just the soil, yes, and also the practices and the laws. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a good video, very informative.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible.